So ever since DBD added the Tokyo Ghoul chapter to Dead by Daylight, I swear to God, everybody hates this killer so much. This must be the most hated killer I've seen out of this game, maybe since Skull Merchant. Maybe she takes the cake, but he's got to be a close second. And kind of rightfully so, I can see where the hate comes from. This killer is not that hard to play at a decent level, but counterplaying even just a semi-decent Kaneki is very, very difficult, and he kind of just kills you very, very easily unless you know very specifically what to do, and it's very hard to learn that what to do, which is why I wanted to make this video. Now, before I get to the actual meat of this video, I do want to say that when you counterplay Kaneki properly, a lot of what ends up happening is you kind of turn him into a basic M1 chase killer. So if you're not comfortable with that kind of aspect of the gameplay yet, we do have guides for that. We have a 3-part guide, both beginner, intermediate, and advanced, and I will link a playlist of those guides down below, so make sure to check that out if you're not super comfortable in M1 chase. Okay, so let's just jump in really quickly and talk about what this killer even does. So this killer has tentacles on his back that you can use to jump around the map. He basically flies around like Spider-Man. You have 2 dashes by default, and you can unlock a 3rd dash by getting a bite attack on a survivor, which basically happens if you grab them with your tentacle on any dash other than the first dash. This bite attack will injure you and put you into deep wounds, and also the hit detection on this is fucking ridiculous, and it'll hit you like around corners, around walls. Basically, you cannot avoid this. You cannot avoid this first damage state, and that's like probably the #1 thing to accepting Kaneki and learning to counterplay him is just know that you cannot avoid this damage. This is probably a big thing that gets people upset about this killer, but you have to just accept it and know that this first hit is free no matter what. The good aspect here, though, is that the bite does make the killer stand still in place and go through an animation for a short amount of time, and it puts his power on complete cooldown, so you can make a lot of distance after a bite. Now, this bite attack can only put you into deep wounds. Beyond that, you cannot do damage with the actual grab itself anymore. So from this point, in order for the killer to kill you with this power, he basically has to jump right on top of your back and cancel power midair so that he can swing very shortly after. Or he can use his power to basically vault after you at a powder window, which we'll call a Scamper from now on because it's very similar to Chucky's Scamper on release. Now, there's a lot to unpack here in terms of what to do against this, so I'm going to try to organize this as best I can. So let's just start with the Scamper. This is probably the easiest thing to do on Kaneki that gets you kills, and also probably one of the hardest things for survivors to deal with when they're relatively newer to learning to counterplay the killer. A Scamper will happen when Kaneki dashes into a pallet or window with the movement of his dash, and the speed at which the Scamper happens will be one of 2 speeds. Basically, the normal default speed is extremely slow and really not that much of a threat. This happens in every situation other than the one situation where it speeds it up, which is if the killer is 1, in the enraged mode, and 2, grabs a survivor with his tentacle and uses that as the catalyst for the Scamper actually going through. If at any point a Kaneki does a slow Scamper, right, like the slower speed, this is not really a threat at all. You can kind of just continue looping any way you normally would because the vault is extremely slow and you get plenty of distance to kind of just do whatever you want. However, the faster Scamper is extremely fast. It is fast as shit, and you will probably die if you try to play normally because it's very, very hard to get any distance anywhere. So the 2 options here are either try to take your distance anyway and play the loop, and if you do go for this option, it's very important to note that unless you have a very, very big head start, then you can't really play any big sides of loops. You kind of have to play the small side, which is very, very risky and kind of unsafe. But in a lot of these situations, if you just win 150-50 around the short side of the pallet, you can use that distance to play the big side, making it a safe loop again with the killer's power being on cooldown after the Scamper. Again, if you do have some pre-distance here, you can play bigger loops, but this kind of is something you have to kind of feel out. If you don't have a lot of pre-distance for a Scamper, then you kind of need to just either play the small side or go for option 2, which is going for the revault. Okay, so at the time of me making this video, Revault has not been discovered. It's not really been in the game that long, so people don't really fully understand it yet. So I'm going to break this down to my understanding at the moment of making this video. After a lot of testing of this, it seems to me like if you just start pressing directly into the body of the killer once they start vaulting, and it seems like the more direct you go at them, the better. You just kind of like bump into their body and then sort of phase through them. And this works like, I don't know, like 80% of the time. But obviously 80% isn't 100, so you still do have that off chance that it could fail, and then you just instantly die because you didn't go anywhere, right? Now, it does feel as though there's a timing where the collision completely breaks and you never bump off the killer's collision at all. This timing, I think, would be 100% if you can get it every time, but this timing is extremely precise. Like, it is really hard to do this consistently. To me, this all seems like a bit of just a strange bug, but obviously this is Dead by Daylight, where bugs will stay in the game for years and years and years, so you might as well get used to it. So my advice for most of you guys is that if you're going to go for the revault, I would just go for the easy version that works most of the time, where you kind of just start pressing directly into the body of the killer right away, and then just kind of hope that you phase through them. This will work most of the time. This is where you have to make your own decision after a scamper happens, because no matter what, you're going to be put in a spot where something could go wrong and you could die. So it's more just, do you want to risk the revault not working, or do you want to risk playing the 50-50s of the previous counterplay that we talked about? This is kind of your own choice to make, so just feel it out and go with whatever feels best for you. Okay, so moving on to the second part of Kaneki's power that kills people typically, and that is essentially him jumping right on top of your back and canceling his power midair and M1ing you shortly after he lands. To try to explain counterplay to this, I'll just try to talk about every situation in just kind of a rapid fire way to hopefully cover everything. Now, first off, he is extremely mobile and can kill you very quickly with this. So like the first things first, this might be the most obvious one, but if the killer's power is off cooldown, don't try to like leave the tile that you're currently at and make it to something far away, because he can catch up extremely quickly. That's a very simple one. Don't do that. You need to stay near resources, because you have to know that his mobility is so high that you need some kind of a resource near you, something like a window or a pallet or something that you can use, and you kind of just have to stay there while his power's off cooldown. And even when you are stuck at a loop and you're playing it, you have to be really careful, because again, contrary to most killers, loops that are extremely big are actually more dangerous against this killer because of his ability to make up distance. If he is positioned in a way where he can use one dash to catch up to you really quickly around the loop you're playing, then you really need to be careful about actually going for that loop. Or if you're playing a really big loop, like say the backside of Shack, where he can use multiple dashes, this is pretty much always dangerous if the Kaneki player is good and uses their dashes efficiently, so you want to avoid this pretty much always. This is very much a spacing thing that you have to feel out as you play more and more, and it also depends on the position of the actual killer player themselves, because if they're in a position where they would have to use two dashes to get to you, then obviously you have a little bit more leeway in terms of like how big of a loop you can play, whereas if they're in a position where they can get you with one dash, then you have to be a lot more careful. If you do ever get caught in a position where you're playing a side that's too big and the killer is trying to basically like cut you off and get in front of you, you could always double back into him as well when he dashes, but this is kind of extremely risky because it's a bit of a 50-50. If he lands right on top of you when you try this, then you just die anyway, but it is like a good thing to attempt to do if you feel like you're going to die no matter what. Now, if you're playing a standing pallet, like an unthrown pallet, this kind of changes a little bit as well, right? Obviously, everything still applies. You don't want to loop around a really large side, but if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're kind of forced to throw it, you have to be really careful about this because of the scamper. If the killer pulls up his power and scampers you in the middle of you throwing pallet, it makes it really difficult to apply any counterplay. You get even less distance because the animation starts while you're still stuck in animation, and it also makes it a little bit harder to even time the revolt because of that as well. So you have to be a little careful about not just throwing the pallet instantly and predictably, letting the killer get the instant scamper. This is where pallet patience comes in really, really useful, and this obviously varies depending on your ping. If you're someone that plays on like 20 ping, you could be way more patient than someone that plays on like 80, but whatever your ping allows, try to be as patient as you can with the pallet. Don't just throw it immediately right away. Try to wait until it seems like the killer is actually committing for something to throw it. And hell, a lot of the times against even like newer or not so great Kaneki players, you can literally just fake the pallet throw and then do another loop around the object, because most bad Kaneki players rely on the scamper to get downs, and if you see that someone's relying on this too much, you can literally just fake the pallet throw and then loop again. You could also tell that the killer is starting the animation for the scamper as well, because the tentacles go up behind his back, so it's something to look out for. However, I do need to mention that really, really good Kaneki players are aware of this counterplay, and there is something you can do where you kind of just tap power for like a split second, and it makes the animation go up like the killer is pulling up for scamper, but you don't really lose any speed at all, and really good Kaneki players will do this as a way to bait you into greeting and then kill you for it. So again, this is like a weird balance that you have to play, but just try your best to be patient and really try to play based around the skill of the Kaneki that you're going against. For the most part, the main goal here is just to get the pallet down without allowing for the scamper during the animation, and as long as anything beyond that happens, then you can kind of just continue everything else we previously talked about, and you should be good to go. Now, let's also talk about the situation of when you're being chased by Kaneki and you basically get to a pallet, but they're dashing after you. Now, what you want to do here is pretty obvious. You don't want to throw the pallet in the killer's face and give them a free scamper while their power's up, because that will make it a very difficult situation that might get you killed. It's important to note quickly that the killer makes a pretty loud sound when they come out of power that you can hear in this clip right now. And until you actually hear that sound, then you really have no need to throw the pallet or do much of anything, because the killer can't actually kill you until they come out of power. Pretty important to note here too that you want to make sure that you don't give enough space that the killer can walk forward and claim the pallet and remove your prompt from throwing it. So make sure to stand under the pallet and not like kind of far away where you're trying to vacuum. This covers pretty much all the basics now, so I think we can get into the advanced, although it does kind of bleed together because we're going to kind of start right where we left off with basically prompt steal. This is essentially the idea of Kaneki taking away your prompt to either vault or throw a pallet. Now, the real simplified version of this is just if you stand too far away from the pallet, trying to go for the vacuum like most people do. This is typically a good habit against most killers, but against Kaneki, he can grab you with his tentacle and take away your prompt, so it can be very dangerous. Now, that's the simple version of prompt steal. The more advanced one would be taking your prompt away at actual vaults. Now, this is something that works kind of funky. If you, as killer, basically grab the survivor themselves with a tentacle, right as they're about to go set up a vault on a pallet or window, you can essentially take the prompt away from them and then body block them from being able to do it. This is kind of difficult to do and requires really good timing, and I would argue very little Kaneki players are going to do this. This is something that's only going to be done by good Kaneki players. But when you do run into a good player, this is very, very important to actually playing pallets and windows when you're in the chase. The most reliable way to play around this is just to give yourself a little bit of space from the pallet or window before you fully commit to it if the killer is still in power, because as long as you have a little bit of room, the killer can't actually prompt steal. The prompt steal only works when you're directly on top of the pallet or window, so they can scoot in and take the prompt away. So just give yourself a little bit of distance, wait for the killer to act, and then after the killer acts, you can go ahead and take the vault. If you do get prompt stolen as well, what you can do is you could just use your distance from the grab to go around the loop too. This works a lot of times as well, but this is more of like a last resort, and really using the first option should be the most reliable. Another big thing you'll see, this one's a little bit easier, so you probably will see this a little bit more often, is slingshotting. This is essentially the idea of using the velocity of the first dash into the second dash to kind of compound stack the velocity together, and it sends the killer flying at really, really fast speeds. And if killers know what they're doing, there's kind of a skill to this, right? Like I think a basic slingshot can get you maybe like 40 meters, whereas a really, really good slingshot, especially like off a hill, can get you literally the whole way across the map in like the blink of an eye. So this is something to definitely be aware of. And again, the better the killer is, the more you have to watch for this. But just keep in mind that the killer can close an insane amount of distance really fast. And this is important to keep in mind when doing things like generators, right? If you're working on a generator in a completely dead area and you're injured, you have to be very, very careful of this, or maybe even just make it a point to heal up before doing the gen, because the killer can slingshot right under your face and then you just die. Again, like all things in the advanced part of this video, though, depending on the skill of the killer, it kind of depends on how much you need to worry about this. Against a lot of Kanekis, this isn't that much of a concern, so it really just depends. Another thing that good Kaneki players abuse and do, and this is, I guess, a tech, is they essentially can grab you with their tentacle, which normally puts them in like a very, very long cooldown and gives you a lot of distance. But if they grab you with their tentacle and then bump into a wall on their way to you, it actually, for some reason, kicks them out of their power way quicker. They're able to swing faster. So keep this in mind. If the killer ever just grabs you with their tentacle and you're like, what the hell is he doing? He's just, you know, fucking up. If they bump into a wall, make sure you have something very, very close to you, because they'll be able to swing very shortly after. Kidnap tech is a tech that used to exist in this killer that used to be insanely OP. It still kind of exists, but it's not really as strong. It's just kind of a way to force scampers on people that aren't marked. And essentially, it's grabbing them with the tentacle, and the game registers it as going for a bite, but because you're not close enough, it doesn't go for a bite, and the killer just scampers instead. So it's a kind of a way to get a scamper off if you're already kind of dashing around and the person isn't marked. Now, you can counterplay this and get some really free distance here. If a killer is not in their first dash, right? If they've already used one dash, and you're out on the other side of a powder window, just hug the powder window extremely close until they cancel power. If they actually try to grab you, then it'll trigger a bite instead, and that's very, very good because, again, it puts the power on cooldown, locks the killer animation, and gives you a ton of distance. So if you're ever in a situation like this, try to take advantage, and very, very often you can bait the killer into biting you and giving you a ton of distance that you can do whatever you want with. And honestly, that covers pretty much all the bare basics, all the important information you need. Now, Kaneki is a very complicated killer. There's a lot of things that are possible with him, and new things are being discovered all the time. For instance, I recently was shown this crazy like velocity tech thing on Shaq, where you could basically fly from one corner a whole way to the other side in like the blink of an eye. But all this stuff that's being discovered is still pretty easily counterplayable by just still following the same rules that I talked about throughout this video. So I'm pretty sure you should have all the tools you need at this point. I know this is a lot, but if you you really take the time to learn all this, Kaneki genuinely becomes a very fun killer to play against. He's really honestly one of my favorites to go against, and I think if you really just take the time to learn all this, you will probably end up liking him too. So just give it a chance, practice up, and then next thing you know, you're going to be making Kaneki players rage quit, and you know, that's a fat W for everybody. So thank you guys so much for watching this. If you guys enjoyed this, leave it a like, subscribe, all that jazz, share it with people, share it around, help other people learn. And that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching this. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Until next time, I'm out of here. See ya. I'll take care. See ya. See you later. See ya.